In this video, we report on findings on research that we have conducted on a paper titled "From Cable News to Social Media Success, International Engagement with Sky News Australia's Brand of News." I'd first, before we'd like to start, begin by acknowledging that we meet and work on Aboriginal land and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. We acknowledge that this land has never been ceded and that reconciliation will not be possible until there is truth-telling and a treaty. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Simon Copland. I'm a PhD student at the Australian National University, and I'm working on this project with Axel Bruns and Timothy Graham from the Queensland University of Technology's Digital Media Research Centre. The Australian cable news channel Sky News Australia has charted an unusual trajectory in recent years. Operated by controversial conservative media magnate Rupert Murdoch's Sky News Corporation and broadcast on its Australian pay TV network Foxtel, the channel has long been regarded as comparatively unsuccessful. Even in the context of the already limited audience footprint of Foxtel itself, it has struggled to attract a regular viewer base of significant size and has often been ridiculed as at times as being watched mainly in airport lounges and in the offices of politicians. But such unimpressive pay TV audience ratings obscure a considerably more significant development elsewhere. Sky News Australia's content is shared and consumed increasingly widely in digital form via social media. As of April 2021, for example, its YouTube channel had 1.42 million subscribers, and its videos have been viewed more than 856 million times. That is well ahead of the 1.32 million subscribers and 525 million views attracted by a leading Australian public broadcaster, ABC News. Engagement with its Facebook content exceeds that of the content posted by other Australian news providers. And this content is often linked to conspiracy theory material, which receives the greatest viewership on the platform. In this paper, we investigate the global reach of Sky News' digital content. So first, using the Digital Method Initiative's YouTube data tools, we identified 20,000 Sky News Australia videos posted on YouTube in 2020 and early 2021, ranging from March to February of those years.
And from there on, then we identified where these videos were shared on public pages, public groups, and public verified profiles on Facebook. So for any of the video IDs or titles that we identified on YouTube, we searched the Facebook data access tool CrowdTangle for any posts that contain links to these YouTube videos themselves. That resulted in 22,000 posts from nearly 8,000 unique spaces. And we saw a sharing of about 3,500 unique videos. We also saw posts containing native Facebook videos from Sky News Australia. Those were significantly more posts, but in fewer unique spaces, and also significantly more unique videos. So in other words, there are more spaces sharing fewer videos from YouTube and fewer spaces sharing more videos directly from the native Facebook videos that Sky News itself posts. That gathering to allow for some dissemination of these videos from YouTube was from the 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of March 2021. We then also tried to combine these data sets by conducting a pairwise comparison between the YouTube video descriptions and Facebook video messages in order to identify where they were in fact the same video shared both via Facebook native video and via YouTube. Tim?
Yeah, and one of the basic research questions that we had was really to understand, well, what are the themes of these videos? And one of the challenges that we experienced was the sheer size and the number of videos that we had to contend with. So what we used was a mixed methods approach to automatically classifying the video descriptions into a small set of themes or topics that would be able to give us a kind of bird's eye overview of the general topics or the general themes of what these videos were. And to do this, we used a computational method known as topic modeling. And specifically, we used a fairly standard approach, the LDA or latent Dirichlet allocation topic model. And this involved running the text descriptions through the model, which produced a smaller set, a much easier to work with set of 45 topics that broadly describe the topics of the videos that were being posted. And this process, of course, included a manual coding. So these topics had to be interpreted and understood qualitatively by the research team. And so Simon and I embarked on a process of manually coding this and assessing the reliability of how much we agree on the topics. And we found this to be, there was a very high agreement between our interpretation of these topics.
All right, so to give you an idea of the volume in the first place of content that we captured, this is the volume of posts per day over the course of this period, distinguished here into native Facebook and YouTube videos. And we see some divergent patterns here. These patterns are in part linked by geographic distribution of the pages and groups sharing this content. It appears that native Facebook video is shared more widely in Australian groups and pages, and YouTube videos more widely in international groups and pages. And we'll have more to say about that further down the track as we go further into the analysis. We also see an obvious increase in the sharing of videos. In the first place, there's a brief spike early in 2020 in the context of the global pandemic, and then a gradual and significant increase towards the end of the year, linked largely to US politics and, of course, the US presidential election at the end of 2020. Now, we then constructed a network between these Facebook spaces sharing video content and the videos themselves, and this is what it looks like. Here we are showing both the pages, groups, and verified profiles, as well as the videos themselves in a single network. The size of these nodes here is representative of the weighted degree, so both the volume of sharing as well as the volume of being shared for the videos. And the color here indicates the most prolific sharers. And we see that these are here largely found on the left of this network graph. So there are on the left a handful of spaces that are very, very active sharers of Sky News videos. Whereas on the other side, we see a few videos that are being very widely shared by a large group of not necessarily very active sharers. Looking at some of the most shared videos in this network, we find that the most shared videos actually are located on the right of this network, and the structure of that network will become clearer. And we see, in fact, that some of these videos relate very obviously to US politics, discussions about the US election, and some relate to broader conspiracy theory content, including things like the so-called Great Reset and attacks on the World Economic Forum in Davos. So the most shared videos in our network tend to have an international or US theme. That's already emerging from this graph. Now, zooming in to identify some of the most prolific sharers, we find those much more on the left side of the network, and they often have a very strong Australian focus. So while the most shared videos are internationally or US themed, the most active individual sharers, pages and groups that are sharing Sky News content tend to be Australian. Many of those actually are also related directly to Sky News. So Peter Credlin as one of the Sky News anchors, and Outsiders as a Sky News program are, of course, very actively sharing their own videos as well. And beyond that, we're seeing a number of what tend to be extremist and often far-right groups that are very actively sharing Sky News content. If we look at the pages and groups with the most subscribers in the network, we see that there is a broad distribution. There are a handful of Australian pages and groups with large numbers of subscribers, but also many that are either related to US politics or, in fact, that are conspiracist and international in nature. Further looking at the country of the largest number of administrators for pages, this is something that CrowdTangle provides, unfortunately only for Facebook pages, not groups. So we have only limited data, but what emerges here quite clearly is a significant geographic distinction. On the left of the network, we see largely majority Australian pages, So where the majority of admins of these pages can be identified as being based in Australia. And on the left hand on the right hand side, we see predominantly US based admins with a smattering of other countries in between. So again, and this is a refrain of our analysis, we see a distinction between Australian and US in the first place, and some international participants as well in this network. Now, zooming in further, I'll hand over to Tim.
Yeah, so zooming in here, we see a micro close-up of the top middle part of the graph, which, as Axel mentioned before, contains a lot of international administrators and for the pages and the groups that are here. And in particular, what we start to see emerging within this more international sort of bridge between the Australia on the left-hand side and the more US predominant shares on the right-hand side is pages and public groups that have a focus on what we might broadly characterize as conspiracy theory type content, far right, anti-globalist kind of discourses. And this really does characterize what we think is a very coherent emerging theme once we look at the topics. And here we can see a table that contains a selection of the topics from our topic model analysis. Again, what this serves to do is to highlight what some of the key themes are of the videos that are being produced and shared. And what we can see here is a selection of themes or topics in the left-hand column that map very quite clearly to geographic or geopolitical kind of focal points, as Axel has done in the right-hand side here. And so what we can see is that some of these themes, such as topics, videos that are around the 2020 US presidential election, Donald Trump, some of the election-related conspiracy theory content, like at the Hunter Biden email and laptop issue, are very US focused. And so these themes are very dominant on the right-hand side of the network. Then we see a selection of internationally focused topics, which include such things as anti-China discourse, economic and financial policy related issues relating to COVID, free speech and censorship, and so on. And then, of course, following this fairly clear structural mapping, on the left-hand side, we see the Australian-focused topics, which have a much more domestic policy and social issue focus, including, of course, the coronavirus response and governance in Australia, but also big ticket issues and controversies around climate change and energy policy as well. And what we can see in this network here is, putting this all together, we start to see that this mapping of the themes or the topics with their geopolitical focus points really does give us this very clear distinction between the Australian focus on the left, the US focused on the right-hand side, and then in the middle, this international bridge, especially in the top part of this graph, which really connects these audiences and there's different kinds of interest and engagement together. And so a question that arises from this is, well, what are the key takeaways for providing an overall summary about this network and how we can understand these news sharing patterns?
So from that, we have developed what we'd say is a key takeaway and three key spaces in which Sky News Australia are sharing their news. And so we can see on the left here a small number of Australian spaces, some official Sky News affiliated pages that share many videos. So they're prolifically sharing videos, predominantly from Facebook. So they're doing it mostly on Facebook and with mostly Australian themes. So things around coronavirus, climate change, Australian politics in the Australian, all in the Australian context. And then on the right, we have a large number of spaces, which are mostly public groups related to US politics. They share a smaller number of videos, but they're predominantly on YouTube, but with mostly American themes. And so here we see a lot of discussion about the US election in 2020 and conspiracy theories related to that in particular. And then in the middle, we have a diverse range of spaces, including public groups and public pages promoting conspiracy theories and COVID-19 misinformation. And in addition to that, we would say a lot of anti-Chinese material. And these share videos from both YouTube and Facebook with international and other themes. And so we can see here three distinct spaces in which Sky News's social media video content in particular is being shared in Australia, in the US, and some internationally. So Sky News Australia, therefore, has developed a digital strategy to push conservative and at times quite conspiratorial ideas, primarily to the US and also into Australia. And we argue that this has given it significant digital growth and shows significant influence of the news channel on social media platforms. And we believe it allows it to shape discourse in both these countries. We frame Sky News as becoming the equivalent of an RT, Russian Times, or Fox News, but one with the Australian context, taking Australian ideas and pushing them into an international audience. We'd like to make some acknowledgements for this research. The research is funded by the ARC project. You can see the number there, evaluating the challenge of fake news and other malinformation. It's also supported by the Australian Research Counter Centre for Excellence for Automated Decision-Making in Society, and Facebook data is provided courtesy of CrowdTangle. Thank you all very much for watching our video.
Thank you all.